So today is Mother's Day. You know, and as I said earlier, it's a time for us to honor that motherly love that is out there in the world and all the different forms that it shows up and all the different ways that it shows up in our lives and in our children's lives. Because we're always kind of children growing up, needing mother's love in one way or another. And, you know, it's that nurturing, really, that we're looking for. It's the nurturing that we're honoring in our lives. And so today's talk title is It Takes Divine Love. And I started it, actually, my original talk title was It Takes Motherly Love. But I decided to switch it because we actually need a little bit more. Right? Motherly love is actually, the first step. Divine love is the ultimate of motherly love. And sometimes I think that we put very high bar on what our expectation is for motherly love. Mother's Day's been around since the early 1900s, so over 100 years now in the current form. There was previous forms of it. And it was put out to honor all the mothers in all the different ways. And I was thinking, well, what exactly is motherly love? How do we define it? And I went out and I found a poem by Helen Steiner Rice, who was born 1900. So her version of what motherly love is kind of from that time. It's kind of what our culture has said is motherly love. And it goes like this. A mother's love is something that no one can explain. It is made of deep devotion and of sacrifice and pain. It is endless and unselfish and enduring come what may, for nothing can destroy it or take that love away. It is patient and forgiving when all others are forsaking, and it never fails or falters even though the heart is breaking. It believes beyond believing when the world around condemns, and it glows with all the beauty of the rarest, brightest gems. It is far beyond defining, it defies all explanation, and it still remains a secret like the mysteries of creation. A many-splendored miracle man cannot understand, and another wondrous evidence of God's tender guiding hand. So I think about that, and I think, you know, that's lovely. It is. It's lovely. And, you know, it's a hard bar. It's a high bar to put our mothers up against. And it's hard. It's high for our mothers. And it's high for us when we compare our mothers to that also. And I know for me, personally, that was kind of a root of an issue between my mother and I, was that there was this culture saying that your mother should be all of that. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, never failing. Right? Because a mother's love is always sustaining. But my mother just turned 88 last week. Yeah. And I love my mother dearly. And I'm so blessed that she's still here. But I remember as a child, you know, that wasn't necessarily the feeling I had. My mother was born in 1928. She was one of 13 surviving children. My grandmother had 2 stillbirths. So she had at least, there was a couple of twins, so she had at least 13 pregnancies. My mother was like number 9 in line there, so when she was born, there were many children in the family already. And they were poor. They lived in Oklahoma and Texas, and my mother's family would pick cotton to make ends meet. And they would move around, and it was unstable. And she, when she was 14, she hopped a train from Oklahoma and went all the way to Sheridan, Wyoming. God's hand was watching her on that one. And she got off the train, and the sheriff found her and kind of took her under his wing. And so she, found a boarding house, and she has some colorful tales to tell about that. But she went to the cat house first. Enough said on that one. But she ended up becoming a waitress and living her life. And it was a hard life in many ways. And she wasn't prepared necessarily to be this story of a mother. But when I was really little, 5, 6, she was everything that was to me. Because that's how much we love them. And we, filter everything. We're so young, we don't know anything different. And so she was absolutely, in my mind, she was all of that. And then I went to live with my aunt for a year. And when I came back, it wasn't the same. I was older, but there had been some separation. And now, I was a really bright kid. I was really smart. And you start, if you're in that way of measuring things in your life, you measure things. And she didn't measure up, in my estimation, at that time in my life. And, it got to the point where my mother and I would be in the same room with her for 45 seconds. And she would start annoying the heck out of me. And that went on for years, 45 seconds. And then you know what happened to me? I came here. Seriously, I came to Namaste. And I took foundations class. And foundations class is our very lowest level, beginning step into our philosophy class. Will teach you what we believe. And we give you some tools. And it used to be a 13-week class. It's a 10-week class now, but one of those weeks in the 13-week format was all about forgiveness. And I was like, forgiveness? What do I have to forgive? But then we did this meditation. And, and it was like, well, picture in your mind somebody that you need to forgive. And my mother's face came floating in. And after 45 seconds, I was annoyed. But, I went through that process that we teach for forgiveness, which is that forgiveness is an internal process. It has absolutely nothing to do with the other person doing anything, right? It is about us and our relationship with them and our relationship to the divine. And when we know, and when I can know for my mother, the truth of her, that not only is she the life and the power and the presence that God is, perfect as she is, but know that in every moment, every instance that she was interacting with me, that she was doing the best that she could. In that moment, then I am free. I'm free nothing about her. It's me. She didn't change one iota. Well, maybe she's, everybody softens as you get a little older, so I'm sure now that she's 88, she's not exactly the person she was, but she didn't have to change, is the point. And I could love her. And I think the same thing is true of God. My relationship to God was not that great as a child either. I knew I was gay when I was little. I just did. And I would go to church, and by the way, this is nothing against the churches that I went to. Absolutely nothing. Their message of love is good. But I heard from their message that being gay was unacceptable. That God's love and by the way, the message is transforming throughout the world on this, and I'm so thankful for that. But when I was little, it was, I'm 55, it was a while back. And the message was that, you need to change. And so, as children do, I'm going to tell you, with kids, if you reject them, they reject you. It's just the way it is. And that's what I did. It was like, if I'm not loved and accepted for who I am, then I don't want any part of that. Even though there was this calling, this voice inside of me that was saying, no. You are loved. You are accepted. And what it took was this place right here. I came here at the invitation of a friend all the way back in 2000. And they were a year old, and they were doing an open house, and she had a flyer. And she handed me the flyer, and she said, it would be wonderful if you would support me at this event we're having. She didn't say anything about church. And I'm like, oh, well, I love you. Absolutely, I'll come support you. And, I look at the flyer later, and the old name, we're now Namaste Centers for Spiritual Living. Our old name back in those days was Namaste Science of Mind and Spirit Center, right? And I went, spirit? Is that a code word for God? I don't have the best relationship with God. But I decided to show up anyway. And I walked through the door, and in my mind it was, one time and you're out. And I walked through the door, and we were in the World Trade Centers, and we were in the Hilton, this was 16 years ago, and, walked in, and the first thing I heard was well, she wasn't a reverend then, it was Sonny Cantrell Smith singing. And she opened my heart. Yeah, it wasn't Reverend Kristen, it wasn't her that opened my heart that day. It was the singing. And so, Kenny, wherever you are, it's the music that touches us first. Lead with your heart. The brain will come later. So, I just want to point out that just like my mother, God did not change that day. God is unchanging. It was my perception of God that changed that day. And I allowed that never-ending, huge, all the time acceptance and love to actually come and for me to know it. And I have since come to know God, not just as God, not as this thing that's out there, but the thing that's in here. And I know it as my beloved. So I also thought, well, I'm going to go talk to a woman for Mother's Day that I consider to be a quintessential mother. She's actually in ministerial school. Her name is Nicole. And I told her I was going to be talking to you guys, so I have permission to share anything that she said. But I asked her, I said, I know that you're a person who really spends a lot of time trying to perfect the art of being a mother. I mean, she really makes it a huge focus. And I said, what is the secret? What's your biggest secret for being a mother? And what she told me was that, the number one thing you have to do with your children is make sure that they know that you want them around. That's a form of love, to make sure you want them here. They're free to be somewhere else, but I want them here. And I think God is like that. That God knows that secret. That there's always, even when I was pushing God away, there was always this feeling, this power, this presence, not out there, but in here. It was saying, come, my darling. Come, my beloved. And, it's really that acceptance that's just like they say of Jesus in the Bible. And I'm going to paraphrase it. He says, you are my beloved, of whom I am wonderfully pleased. Wonderfully pleased. And that's always whispering to us. Always, 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 right there. You are my beloved. Because anything that's said to Jesus is said to us. Because Jesus is the great example in our lives. So, I went to a book called Tattoos on the Heart, which is just one of my favorite books. I taught a class last summer for 4 weeks on love and acceptance based on this book. And it was written by Father Greg Boyle. And he tells a story of a guy named Rigo. Father Greg he leads up Homeboy Industries out of East LA, and they work with gang members. And he tells a story in there of how he went to juvenile hall, because he makes that as part of his regular circuit, and talked to a young man named Rigo. And Rigo told him a very difficult story about his father. But then he went on to point out his mother, who was across the way, and to say that his mother came to visit him every Sunday, and that she took 7 buses to get there. 7 buses, can you imagine? And the realization of that love in his life is what cracked him open and allowed him to change. But it's really realizing his mother's love in his life is really just the first step, maybe, to realizing God's love in his life. And Father Greg says, the desire of God's heart is immeasurably larger than our imaginations can conjure. This longing of God's to give us peace and assurance and a sense of well-being only awaits our willingness to cooperate with God's limitless magnanimity. Say that word 5 times. It just means that God is magnanimous. And God is. So Ernest Holmes, the founder of religious science, the philosophy that we follow, he's famous towards the end of his life for saying that, you know, if he had things to do over, if he could step back in time and change anything, the one thing that he would change is he would focus more on love than on law. That at the time of his life, he had spent a lot of time on the law. And really what he's saying is, you know, there's a famous saying by him that love points the way and law makes the way possible. Because love is that impelling force for us. It's the direction for us. It's the pull for us. It's the way that shows us what is the grandest divine idea for us. And the law is what kind of creates in our life then and moves the blocks into place to allow that vision to show up. And so, you know, what I think is that we kind of have put our emphasis kind of backwards a little bit. That sometimes what I do anyway is I spend so much time on making things happen that I don't spend enough time on saying, where should I be going? What's the direction? Where is God leading me? And that's what divine love really is. Divine love, and it takes divine love to move us through our lives in a path that really brings us happiness and joy, confidence. We say prosperity is joy, you know, moving forward with joy, confidence, and ease. And that's where love is pointing. It's where divine love is pointing. So I just want to leave you with a statement from one of my favorite mothers, Mother Teresa. She's not actually probably a mother, she's a nun, so I don't think she ever gave her. I don't know, I really haven't looked it up, but I probably think not. But, you know, everything that she says is so loving. And one of the things that she said that I think is so powerful is, I have found the paradox that if you love until it hurts, there can be no more hurt, only more love. So my challenge to you this week is to love till it hurts. To take that place in your life, which needs a little bit more love. And you know, it doesn't have to be with anybody else. You don't have to go to that person. You don't have to be with them. You don't have to say a word to them. Because it's all an internal thing. It's all here. If I'm going to love till it hurts, I'm loving here. So let's just go into some prayer. I drop down inside of me. drop down inside of me to that place inside that knows that it knows that it knows. That place inside that is in touch with the infinite. That place inside that knows absolutely that the life and the power and the presence that God is all that there is. That there's nothing besides God. There's nothing besides the love that God speaks. There's nothing in the creative presence that can ever, ever, ever separate us from that divine love. And I know absolutely that as that's the truth of us, that that's the truth of God, it's the truth of us, that life, that power, that presence moves in us and through us and as us. And that as we know ourselves as love, that love shows up so easily. That divine love that we see is the truth of our being. That divine love that is inside of us moves us, sometimes to tears. Sometimes it's a mother's love. Sometimes it's the love of our neighbor coming through. Sometimes it's the love of a stranger that touches us in such a tender way. And I know that no matter how we are feeling in our relationship to those people who love us, no matter how that's showing up in our life in this moment, that the divine love that God is supporting us, is enwrapping us and enfolding us, that we're safe in that love, that we're nurtured in that love, that we're cared for in that love. And for knowing that truth today, I just give thanks. I let that truth resonate at the very center of my being, and I just upwell a sigh of gratitude. And I release this prayer into the law, knowing that it's already fulfilled in the mind that God is, and I say it is good and very good.